I reckon
I did hear from Drew.
I reckon we might go over that. We'll see.
Yeah.
Good to go.
Cool. Hello guys, welcome to another episode of the Wave Running Podcast. Today we're here with two huge assets to the Sydney running community. We got Drew Fryer and we got Jimbo Fitzgerald, who is the Director of Athletics at Sydney Uni. But yeah, I guess let's quickly start off with a bit of a background on who you both are. So we'll start with Drew. Tell us a bit about yourself.
So I've been, I guess, in running now for, as long as it's the only sport I've kept up for a long time now. Yeah, I've been in, what would you say, that sub elite category, would you say?
Yeah,
definitely. For most of my, now that I've finished high school, I sort of moved into that category, and then I did all my high school, started sort of in primary school, and then I sort of moved into, I do a little bit of coaching as well, but I've been in athletics for almost my entire life, and I'm still loving it.
Yeah, and you coach as well, so we'll touch a bit on that as well at the end. Yeah, how about you, Jimbo?
Little plug for Macca's there, loving it. So basically, in a nutshell, without going on for too long, my background, I was a swimmer, water polo, played a bit of rugby, all that sort of stuff. And then when I was 21, nearly 22, I took my brother and sister up to Little Athletics and helped out with the shot put, and a parent liked the way that I engaged with the kids. I decided to go back to Teachers College. I'd done 2 years of economics, which I didn't really enjoy that much up at Newcastle. Took a year off. Was a franchise manager at Domino's, so we'll get another plug in. And and that was it. That was. I had no idea that I'd be now coaching. I'm in my 31st year of coaching, and starting off at Hornsby Little Athletics, and then had a business in my second year. Went and did 2 level 1s in that winter, and just kept progressing. My brother started to get really good, so I went and did my level 2, which is now recognised as level 4 in '99. Then got a scholarship with NSWIS, so I spent 12 months, not necessarily under anyone's tutelage, but I made a real effort to get around Australia and spent some time down in Victoria with a few of the better coaches down there. Went up to Queensland, spent a lot of time in Canberra with Dick Telford. Actually, I think I did 4 or 5 sessions with Dick, so obviously learned a lot from him, and all of them. He's continued to have success for a very long time. And just kept plugging away, and worked in the school system for most of my career. So at Westfield Sports for 12 years, and then at Abbottsley for 11 years. Had a 2-year crossover. I can coach all events in athletics, so I've been the throws coach at Joey's, and I've been a multi-coach at a few of the other private schools like Schedule Redlands and things like that. So lots and lots of coaching. I did a little bit of teaching for 5 or 6 years, and I haven't actually taught in a classroom for a long time, but love being an educator. And then more recently, I had a male dominant squad from about 2007, 2008, when Nick Bromley came back to me after coaching him as a junior, and then that spawned into coaching James Kahn, and then in that period of time, Jenny joined me, along with Billy Clark and a whole bunch of the Westfield kids, some of which I'm still coaching now, like Opsa Yusuf. I've been coaching Opsa continuously now for 11 years. So the journey just kept going on, and obviously Jenny and Millie were very successful in Rio, and then Jenny was able to back that up in Tokyo in 2021. And COVID obviously knocked my business around, and then the opportunity here came up. So I obviously applied and got the position, and have been fortunate enough to, just having had my first lap around the sun as the Director of Athletics at Sydney Uni. And I've known this dude since he was 10. We actually met in a cafe in Berry having a milkshake before he did the cross country in Yarra when he was a little shiner in primary school. The cohort of athletes here, from the sprinters and people like obviously Rowan and Mackenzie Little and the javelin, but then all through my EAP program, the success that we've got going at the moment. Last year's EAP that I brought in for this year are fantastic. We've already got Alana Pitcher, who has automatically been selected for Budapest, along with Michelle Jenike and Nicola Olaslagis, all from Sydney Uni. And at the moment, in the roll down, we've got 11 Sydney University athletes that potentially will be competing at the World Championships in Budapest. So my new gig that Drew and I have set up is ESP. So along with On Track, which has got quite small, I've created a high velocity division with On Track. So I've got a group of 5 or 6 sprinters now that are working out of Homebush, and then we've got a few distance runners that are crossing over with the Eastern Suburbs Project. We're basically coming off working here at Sydney Uni. There were a few athletes that kind of, not so much directionless, but wanted a change, wanted a fresh stimulus in regards to training and training environments and all that sort of stuff. So Drew and I started probably, I don't know, about 6 months ago, sort of started postulating if he got in to do his masters at the uni, which he did. So he's now on EAP. That if that all fell into line, that basically we would give athletes the opportunity to do something that's for them, by them. So basically,
we'll probably get on to ESP.
We'll do that, but just that you know. So it's not me directly always coaching. So it's something that's new, but that's literally from how I started to exactly where I am now. So
good summary.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that kind of summarizes the whole podcast perfectly because we're going to touch on everything Jimbo just talked about.
Yeah. Just 31 years. It's hard to compress 31 years into less than 10 minutes.
That's why I tried to get my summary. It took about 10 seconds.
Yeah. You're only 22. I'm 30 years older than you. Yeah.
I love it.
I've been obviously, coaching a lot longer than you've been here. So all good.
Yeah.
Sorry about
No, totally fine. Well, one of my questions was going to be like how you met, but it's pretty cool how you met him, Barry, when Drew was like 10, because you've probably seen him grow all these years now and develop as an athlete to who he is today, which is pretty awesome. But because you guys are both coaches, I'm wondering what you guys think is like the most important thing that you've learned from your years of coaching like athletes that are younger. Starting with Drew, I guess.
Jimbo and I talk about this a little bit as well. How you learn. I've felt that I've learned stuff ever since I started coaching that I wouldn't have learned if I didn't coach. Like I've learned sort of the side of athletics from the athlete side, but then I've also learned the coaching side, which I feel helps. I feel it helps me in my understanding of not only how I train, but also how to coach the kids that I coach, because I'm seeing both perspectives. So I feel that, say, when I'm setting a session or what we're going to do for the week, or I'm not just thinking, so what should they be doing? I'm also thinking from the athlete's perspective, would they really want to do this? Would I want to do this? So I feel like it does help not only just my running, but my coaching as well, that I've got both perspectives. So it allows me to see from both sides of the field to understand what I feel would work best. But I've enjoyed, as I think I said before, I've been coaching now since 2019, and I've enjoyed sort of understanding the different roles that athletes and coaches play within athletics and trying to fill, I guess, both roles. But what do you feel with coaching younger athletes?
Obviously that's how I learned. So all of my learnedness of my coaching was developing young kids. So from my first squad, when I had created my first squad, I actually had three different squads. So I had weenie oneers. So they were the kids that were under 8, and I had probably half a dozen of those. And then I had a general squad, and then I had a development squad. So I was able to quite quickly ascertain sort of more what kids enjoy rather than, and so therefore, because I, like what Drew said, when you're getting that feedback and whatever else, you realise that if you've got kids turning up and they're not happy and they're not excited to be there, I learned that as a teacher as well, that if you're providing lots of variety and you're not overtraining kids, so in those first 3 or 4 years of my formative coaching, like the kids basically, they were my tool, as it were, to understand exactly what I can and can't, or what I should or shouldn't do. So, and I've been very fortunate that most of the junior athletes that I've coached, nearly 100%, have never had bone-related injuries. So I learned pretty early on what they can and can't do. So
yeah, I think longevity in the sport is so important, and I talk about this a lot, but taking your time when you're younger and developing slowly so that you can actually stay consistent over multiple years rather than, being out for 6 months or a year because of a bone stress injury is so important, I think. So I think you guys are both, developing athletes in the right way. And it's awesome to see that you guys are, a few years apart, but you still have like similar mindsets. And because you've known each other for such a long time, you have similar outlook on life in general as well, which is pretty cool to see. And going more into your coaching, Jimbo, you've done like coaching super young athletes and also quite developed adults as well. Do you still enjoy doing a bit of everything, or have you moved on more towards those like sub-elite and elite groups?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I love coaching. So as long as the kids are turning up, and I think that's the one thing as well I've learned as a teacher, that if I see that people are enjoying what they're doing, then the old positive feedback loop. So the happier and that I see athletes, the more I want to come back. So, and at the moment, to answer the question directly, in my squad, in regards to the squad, the youngest person I'm currently coaching is 15. I made a decision at the start of the year that she's the only person that I coach that's still at school. Everyone else is at university or working. The fun runners, the kids all the way through to the fun runners and stuff like that.
Whereas recreational.
Yeah, more that recreational side of it. Whereas I never set my business up like that. Like, it was always about school. And so with the schools, obviously the talented kids wanted to have external coaching. So, and as long as there's still a demand for me to coach at a junior level, I will continue to coach at a junior level. And I find the biggest difficulty, and Drew and I talk about this heaps, and everyone talks about it, but no one does anything about it. I just think that there's far too much training being given to young athletes. It's very frustrating when I'm hearing rumours that 12-year-old kids are uploading 16, 18K runs on Strava on a Sunday. And I think that for me, coaching junior athletes, I tell parents, I said, if your kid's talented, like let's say that they're good enough to compete at state, I said, I'm not going to coach them to win a state medal they might go to nationals, but they're not going to win medals until their body's ready for it. And if they do it, if I coach someone and they're very successful very quickly and they're doing minimal training, fantastic. But I'm not going to be one of these people that's going to just keep loading the body until the kids win, but then they break. And as you said, coming back to the point with injury, that someone like Obsa, for example, in 11 years, Drew's always wanted to know how he can get away with being able to compete with only doing 35, 40 Ks a week. I said, because he's never got injured. So his accumulative volume has never been impacted. He's never had to have 3 months out or 6 months out. And that's why I say every training session that you don't miss it just keeps adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. And I'm seeing more and more now, and anecdotally, there's a lot more kids in boots, and it's very disturbing. So sometimes I'm a bit reluctant to get involved with junior athletes, but for the most part, if they're there and they're keen, then I'll give it a crack.
Hey, when you say sometimes, that's a bit of a hurdle. Junior athletes being told that they might not be trained to win a national medal at 14, but then I find it pretty hard to understand that doesn't really matter. You should be worrying about staying in the sport.
Yeah, they can't see that. So you got to work. You end up having good relationships with their parents. So the parents that understand the process, they're the kids that are in the sport post school. So and there's a lot of them. I mean, you only need to look at the depth that we've got going on at the moment. You look at the junior national championships up in Brisbane, and it was just some of the performances. Okay, there's probably some of the kids might be training a bit too much, but across all events, all disciplines, the amount of talent that is actually being produced at the moment across Australia is, like, having been involved for 3 decades, I've never seen anything like it. So,
yeah, I mean, I haven't even been in Australia for that long. Like, it's been 5 years, but even then, in the 5 years, I feel like athletics in Australia has grown so much, and the upcoming talent is actually insane. Like the level that they're competing at. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited to see how far we can take it in the next few generations, because it's only going to get better, in my opinion. But yeah, Drew, I know you're humble. You probably don't want to talk about it too much, but this is your opportunity to talk about it. You got an award for your coaching. Like, you got the Young Sport Coach of the Year award for Sport New South Wales. So not even in athletics. It was like across all sports where, Athletics NSW nominated you. Talk a bit about that and what it meant to you to get that award.
Yeah, no, it was obviously it was a big surprise getting firstly nominated by Athletics New South Wales to represent them at the Sport New South Wales Awards. And yeah, you're right, it was for the Young Coach of the Year in 2021. And yeah, I went to the awards night. I really didn't think I'd win or be a finalist or anything, but yeah, I went to the awards night, and funnily enough, I got awarded with the title of Young Coach of the Year 2021. And it's not about the coaches, it's not about the like it was great to receive it, but that was more just about, I'm very lucky that my first couple of years of coaching, the kids that I've been able to work with have had pretty much nothing but trust with what my methodologies are and how I think they should go about it. And ever since I started it, because that was only 2 years into coaching, like I only started in 2019, and then that was given, like I started probably December 2019, and then that was given like, I think it was something like March 2021. So it wasn't that long after I started coaching, and I was lucky that the small number of kids that I had at the time were just pretty much like what Jimbo said before about understanding that it's not really like winning a national title at 13. Yeah, it's great, but it's not really too important. But I was lucky that they trusted that what I was giving them was what they should be doing. And when the awards selection came around, I suppose the committee saw what I was doing with my group, and also I was coaching. I still do coach at Cranbrook School, and they saw what I was doing there with my brother Kurt. And Cranbrook's been pretty successful lately, picking up the premiership last year, and we're in a pretty good position. So yeah, I was very lucky to receive that award. But yeah, as Jimbo always talks to me about, and we always agree that yeah, it's not really. It's great to receive an award as a coach, but you're more there for the athlete, and you're there to help them achieve what they want to achieve, and you're just sort of, I guess, would you say what, like the guiding light? Would you say
The facilitator?
The facilitator. But no, it was very good, and yeah, it was very great to be recognised for my work in coaching. But yeah, it was. But a lot of credit does go to the boys and the parents, the trust that they placed in me. But yeah, hopefully that was only the beginning, though. 2021.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Aren't you a young coach?
Yeah.
When you become an old coach.
It's awesome that you got it, within 2 years of starting coaching Fryers Run Club, because that's still pretty young, and obviously you are very experienced as an athlete.
I was very lucky that the boys that I started with when I started coaching they're pretty talented athletes. So I started with like juniors called Nicholas Rogers and George Perkins, and Callum Frado, and they were sort of my first three. I think I only had those three when I got given the award. I might have had one more round when the award was given, but yeah, I was lucky that those first three that I started with were they're pretty talented athletes. So obviously that's a head start if you're coaching someone with a lot of talent. But yeah, I just love that I was able to, within only those 2 years, I was able to really create a bond between the kids that I was coaching at the time, and yeah, I'm still coaching all of them. So yeah, it's always built on just creating the connection. And I was very fortunate that the Sport NSW board recognised what I was doing there.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Nick Rogers, who's recently finished high school and is going to head to the NCAA. But talk a bit about where he was at when he started with you, what he's achieved during your time that he's been with you, and then where he's going next.
Yeah, so he was the very first person that I started with. I started with him, and then he was the only one I coached for about 3 weeks, and then George Perkins joined me after 3 weeks, and then I was just the three of us for a long time. But yeah, with Nick, when I first started coaching him, his PBs, I can still remember, his 800 PB was 2:13, and that was just off school. That was off the school season, so I was coaching him at school. And then in that school season, I remember he ran 2:13, and his 1500 PB was like 5:05, and he really didn't want to do the 1500. I remember having to talk him into doing that 1500 for about half an hour, and he agreed to do it. And then yeah, ran 5:05. And then that was in 2019. And then obviously since then, he's now gone on to, I guess he's beat my PB in the 800. He's now looking at, he's sitting with 151 as his 800 PB, and also 347 as his 1500 PB. Obviously he's a very talented junior, and I was nothing but fortunate to be able to work with someone as talented as him. And yeah, to see his progression from when I started with him, yeah, it's nothing. Like I couldn't. There's probably not there wouldn't have been a better way that I could have started my coaching career, I guess you say. and the relationship that I've got with him and his parents as well. His parents have nothing but trust in whatever I'm doing with Nick. And yeah, Nick's, I guess, sort of like a younger brother to me now. I know him pretty well now. And yeah, as you said, he finished high school last year. And now he's looking to go. He actually goes in August. He's going to George Washington in America. He's going to college in America to see, to pursue his academic and sporting life over there. And as I'm told, George Washington is supposedly a very smart uni, so he must be pretty smart, apparently. But yeah, so I mean, you met Nick. Probably this year, I guess I sort of introduced you to.
Oh, I've known him for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's obviously a very talented athlete, and it was pretty fortunate to get to work with him.
Yeah, 100%. Moving on to more about you two together, because I know that 2018 was when you made was it your first world school cross country team?
Yeah, so I've only made one world.
Right.
That was the World Schools. What was it called? World Schools Cross Country and it was in Paris.
ISF.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, it was the ISF World Schools Cross Country Championships, and you had to come. I think it was top 6 at national cross country, and I came fourth that year. And yeah, I was lucky enough to be selected into the individual boys team. So with this World Schools Cross Country team, there was an individual boys and girls team, and then also a school boys and girls team. So I was on the team as a part of the individual boys, and Jimbo, funnily enough, was the school he was coaching at the time. Abbottsley made the school girls team, so we sort of reconnected there on that trip. And you were the team? I guess you were just there with your school.
I was completely independent of the team,
Yeah.
but yeah. So, but yeah, I had a few cracks with Abbottsley, 2013 in Launceston, and 2015 at.
To make this schools team, you needed
Ponds.
8? You needed 8.
Yeah, it's 6. The first 4 count, and then 6. And I had a few when I was at Westfields. I had a few girls teams that were pretty good, but we kept coming second at state. Same with my boys teams. And then obviously we'd win state and we'd go to nationals, and there was always another school that was slightly better than us. But 2017, I had a crack hot team, and went down to Hobart, and I think did you run that year? Went it with the wind coming off the lake. Oh, yeah. It was the worst. It was like 5 degrees wind chill. Like it was snowing on Mount Wellington. It was about -3, -4 wind chill. Anyway, my girls got the bacon, and even my actual best runner or second best runner on the day, she ended up finishing 5th out of my team. She ended up with hypothermia, and we still got the bacon. So yeah, we got to go up to Paris, and Abby Rockcliffe, who was part of our team, she actually won the team's race, and Sarah McDermott got 4th, and then Hannah Chorizo got 13th out of 169 starters, and she was only in year 9. So then I had Rosie Fordham, and then Annie Magnuson and Oliver Hogg. So yeah, we were over there, and we got beaten by the Moroccans by literally, it ended up being by 1 place. So it was the most competitive so Drew ran in the most competitive individual race in World Schools Cross Country history. There was 39 countries, and it was a fantastic experience in Paris. And the race patron was Hisham El Garouch. So he was the guest speaker at the opening ceremony, and it was just wonderful experience. So
yeah, it's pretty special. You got to meet the legend in person, Hisham El Garouch.
Yeah, quick story with Hisham. So my history with the World Schools goes back to 2000. So in 1999, I had my brother and Nick Bromley. They came 3rd and 4th in nationals in Darwin. So they were picked because you had to be turning a certain age. You can't be turning 18 the next year, you had to be turning 16, which we found out was incorrect. But so when we were going overseas, potentially you run against people who are turning 19. I only found that out a few years later. Anyway, so they both got picked in the Australian team, and we went to Morocco. So it was the first time that I'd had athletes compete for Australia. So I made the journey over there and had the most amazing time in Marrakesh. It was the weirdest place that I've ever gone in my life. I wasn't used to the poverty and it was Easter weekend, and there were animals being slaughtered in the street, and guys riding around on mopeds with two blokes with a sheep in between them. Like, it was some of the weirdest stuff I've ever seen in my life. I was a bit protected at that point. But long story short, I bought a full Moroccan outfit. So I had the full dress, I had the shoes, I had the little pheasant, or what the hat's called, I had a Moroccan drum. Somehow I got the drum back through customs, I have no idea. Anyway, obviously later that year we had the Sydney Olympics, and I was in the stadium of the night that Garouge messed up the 1500 when Noam Niang got there. But I actually, that night at the Olympics, I was wearing my full Moroccan outfit that I'd actually bought in Marrakesh. So, and I didn't meet Garouge in 2000, but I knew where he was staying. And I think I was working, I was doing something, and I couldn't get there. So I tipped off to my squad where he was, and they all went to the actual, he was staying at the Stanford in Epping, near Epping at Marsfield. And so they all went there, and they all got to meet Garouge and got Eldoret signed, and so it was pretty cool. So my obviously, he's a world record holder, and he's had the world record now for a long time. Probably going to get beaten very soon, but as far as I'm concerned, demigod. So yes, it was very cool having him there in 2018.
It's interesting you say that it might get broken soon, because obviously you're probably referring to Jakob Ingebrigtsen, but it's still a second 95. But yeah, I don't know. It definitely is possible, though, for sure, in the next few years. I'm excited to see what happens there.
When you watch a world record be run, like with Faith this year, like when you see them be run, and like Bolt when he was at the peak of his powers in 2009, when he set both those world records in Berlin, that they win by so much. They're so much better than everyone else. I mean, you look at the 4 hurdles last year, like they win, or 2021, they win by so much that they're that much better than everyone. Whereas I just think now, that race that Ollie ran in the other night, the international competitiveness, to have that many people running under 3:30, once again globally, I don't think we've ever seen that level of depth, and we definitely haven't seen it where the Anglo-Saxon or the Europeans are actually being so competitive that there's 4 or 5 of them now. So whether it's him or one of the Africans, I just think the next 12 months, I wouldn't be leading into Paris anyway. I wouldn't be surprised if the world record goes. So. Yeah.
Definitely true. Even in the 5K recently, there was a race. I forgot which one it was, but there were 13 people that broke the 13-minute barrier in one race, which is like unheard of if you look at the history of the 5K. So it's pretty cool to see, again, how far the world is going in terms of athletics.
And people want to be cynical and say it's the shoes, but at the end of the day, like, the shoes are only making that much of a difference. So.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. Yeah. It's the competition and the better training that everyone's doing, and the more research and all that sort of stuff combined. All the 1%ers are helping out. And obviously the shoes are a part of it, but it's not the only thing.
Exactly. When they changed Mondo, when they went to Mondo, and they made a more giving, like a response system, like, compared to the Rakuten or whatever else, straight away in that 5 or 6 year period that Mondo came in, world records got destroyed. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a bit about more wholesome stuff now. So I'm going to get both of you to talk about each other now. But basically, I want Jimbo to talk about what he thinks.
You leave the room?
Should have been done in private. Do you need a moment?
I want Jimbo to talk about what he sees as a strength in Drew as a coach. And I want Drew to talk about what he thinks Jimbo's strength as a coach is. I'm wondering if it's similar or if it's different. We'll start with Drew.
What's your just there?
What's it coming out? So I just had a nosebleed before. Sorry about that. I'm incessantly playing with my nostrils.
I reckon I would have thought our strengths would be pretty similar, but I would say I feel Jimbo's. So I've now moved to Jimbo. He's now coaching me, and I've been with him now for 8 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think about 8 weeks. But then obviously I've known him for a lot longer than that. But I feel, and I felt this before he started coaching me, and I still feel it now, 8 weeks in, that his strongest attribute as a coach is his ability to connect with the athlete. And you would think, well, how has he got such good ability to connect with the athlete when he never really had a background in running? But somehow he's still able to form a really good personal connection with who he's talking to. He always says, be in the moment. So maybe it's something to do with that. I feel like whenever you're talking to Jimbo about your running or what you want to do, he's really honestly listening, and he's always partaking in the conversation and thinking hard about what he can do to help you achieve what you want to do, and what he can do to help you, guide you on where you want to go. Not even just in running. It's more just in well, I was going to say in life, but in what you're doing with your career, what path you're setting your life up in. Jimbo's always there to help you go in the direction you want to go in. And if it's in running, great. He'll obviously have more of an expertise in that, but then he'll probably also help you with advice in what sort of career path you want to take, or what uni degree you want to take, or if you want to go overseas, or
relationships.
Or in relationships. But I feel that going back to what I said, I feel without a doubt, and obviously has many other strengths, like Jimbo's knowledge is second to none, but and as Jimbo and I always say, you can know every single detail about running in the world, but unless you have this very key attribute of being able to connect with the athlete and talk to the athlete and be a personable person, it doesn't matter how much information you know. And I definitely feel that we've now got to know, well, we already knew each other pretty well, but I feel like we've got to know each other pretty well, more well these last 8 weeks. And I guess that's due to what I think his greatest strength is, and that's just listening and being with the athlete. I reckon that's so.
I want to add one more thing as well. I think one extra thing that might put Jimbo apart from other people is his like teaching background as well. Because I wouldn't say every athletics coach in the industry has done teaching in the past as well, right? So I think that kind of adds a bit more to that arsenal that Jimbo has, which is pretty awesome because he has the knowledge of the sport and the teaching background, and that's just insane.
Yeah, 100%. I reckon the teaching background, without a doubt, helps him coaching. Like I've found even with my own coaching, how I coach at the high school, I've actually learned a lot of the methods I coach with from some of my teachers at school, who I'm obviously still communicating with because I'm still at the school. So I would definitely say his teaching background just helps with the communication, because with a coach and a teacher, they're pretty similar. It's just one, I guess, is telling you to do a session, the other one's telling you how to write an English essay. If you don't want to be in the English classroom, if the teacher's not entertaining and you don't want to be there, how's the student going to learn? It's the same thing if you're at the track. If you don't want to be there and the coach isn't entertaining you or keeping you engaged in the session, well, how good's your session really going to be? So I look at a teacher and a coach, I would say they're pretty similar.
I would just, like once again, anecdotally, a lot of the better coaches around Australia do have teaching backgrounds. So, if you look at, Adam Diddick, he's a chalky by background. Lindsay Watson, he was a TAFE teacher, and I like that's just a couple just quick off the top of my head. But even Gary Bourne, he's a physics lecturer up in Queensland, so he understands how to captivate an audience. But the most important thing I think about the education side of it is, like what Drew said, there's a process to it. So, and I think because I've always been a process-orientated person, so that set where do we want to go with what we're doing this year or next year, or within an Olympiad, and then come back to being in the present, and now we need to execute right here and now. Now, I know a lot of other coaches might operate like that, but a lot of them don't. I think some of them will either get caught up too much here in the now, and then they forget that you don't have to do everything because we're going there. Yeah, we're going there. So like we just got to, so that was nice of Drew to say all that. And I'd say from my perspective of Drew's coaching, we had a real good conversation years ago sitting underneath the scoreboard at Homebush at a particular event. I think that's when I first met Mark. So
First met Nick.
First met Nick. And I was so impressed with Drew's ability to actually articulate his process of coaching. So at the time he was probably only 19, maybe 20 years of age, and he hadn't long been coaching, but because he has had a number of coaches himself, and some people might think that he goes from one to the other, and we've laughed about that, but it's not really, because he and Kurt are always in search of how do they get better. So how do you get better? Well, sometimes you've actually got to do things differently. You can't just keep doing the same. So in having a number of coaches, whether it be in triathlon or in athletics, I think Drew's strength is that he can draw upon that. So it's not just his own experience. And I think a lot of elite coaches who were elite athletes, once again, lose that. They understand the process, but it becomes too constricted, and it becomes too much of, this is how I did it, this is how my coach did it with me, so I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to repeat that because it worked, so we're just going to keep doing it. Whereas I think Drew already, as a young coach, has already understood that it's good to bring ideas in from everywhere and not just rely on. And as a young person, his communication skills are phenomenal, and he actually commands respect. So he does train sometimes with his squad, but I witnessed before we'd actually started coaching, our squads had already started doing some sessions together, and I just was really impressed with how authoritative he is. Like, because as a younger person, when you're coaching people that are maybe only 4 years younger than you, sometimes you can't just expect respect. And I think with a lot of these young guys that are year 10, year 11, and 12, that when Drewy says jump, they say how high. So they're not scared of him, but they're very respectful of his opinions. And when he says, let's get stuff done, and he actually even scared me one day when we were crossing the road at Centennial Park. He raised his voice and I went, whoa, wow, what was that? So, and that's what he does. He commands respect, and he's got a lot of very good attributes for a young coach, which is now helping his running as well. So.
Yeah, it's awesome. That was definitely a little wholesome section of the podcast. Moving on more to Drew, you've done running for a long time and you've dabbled in a lot of different distances, and yeah, your PBs are pretty solid across the board. I would say, like, your 800 all the way up to 10K. I think it was like 153, 346, 809, I think, and then 1414.
809, and then 1414, and the unlucky 3001.
Yeah. Yeah. So
this weekend though, so hopefully I can break 30.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. But tell us what your favorite event is, and is that also your best event, or do you have a different best event and favorite event?
Yeah, I don't really know what my favorite event is. I don't know how, but my best PB is somehow the 1500. I've never really thought of myself as a 1500 runner. Even when I was in year even when I was in year 9, year 8, I was always looking at my coach at the time and me were probably always looking at the 3K and the longer stuff. I was always more of a cross-country runner in high school. So I don't know, I would say my favourite event and one that I feel that I could get the most success at would be the 5K. But somehow the 1500's if you're going just off World Athletics points, somehow the 1500 is my best PB, and I think the 3K is pretty. I think they're both I think the 1500's at just over 1,000 points, and then the 3K is at 1,001 points. It's something like that. So the 15 and 3K are pretty similar. But I'm yet to, I reckon, nail a good 5K and yet to nail a 10K. But yeah, the 1500 is definitely my best PB. But yeah, I feel like the 5K, as I develop a bit more and get a bit older, I feel like the 5K, maybe the 10K as well, but I feel like the 5K would be something that would be probably my main event. But no, good point. But I don't really have I guess some people at 22 would have an event that's their focus. I don't really have which I guess would be a bit, I don't know, is that a bit strange? But I don't really have an event that's my focus just yet.
I think it's good. I think that's as you get older, because we know 800 you're going to peak between 22 and 26, and then you sort of slide out by about 2 years. So 1500, 24 to 28. I mean, there's exceptions obviously to that, but then 26 to 30, and then 28 to whatever when you get to the longer stuff. Because if you look at the way that the Australian 10Ks come down, they've all been 26, 27, 28. And then they've had all that prior experience. You take, there's lots obviously we can talk about, but I look at Collis Birmingham, because for me he's got one of the best ranges that we've ever had. When you think that he's broken 150 for an 800 meters, and then he's run just over an hour for half a marathon, that's pretty insane. And I know Collis was a good 15 guy. Never really did a lot of 15 work, but could always jump into a Sydney Track Classic and run 3:35. And so I think with Drew, I think you haven't been dragged around the race either. He as you know, he's very aggressive when he races and his race style, and And everyone's now got to the point where they go, oh yeah, Drew will do the work. So one day he's going to get in the caliber of the field where he can actually hook a ride and get a few laps where he doesn't have to do all the work. And I think that's in front of him. And I think this summer season, coming off of Brule, he's obviously ran very well in the hour, and once again sort of accidentally found himself in no man's land down there, and that's no place for the faint-hearted. But run a real gutsy race down there and led Sydney Uni to a team victory. Got to get that plug in. But I think, yeah, coming off that, I think Gold Coast this week, and then come back to long course, and then really sharpen up for 10K on the track, and then just see, come back to the 3K, which is probably my most enjoyable event of the year. And yeah, if we can get some bodies around him, who knows? Honestly, who knows?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was wanting to ask you, Jimbo, what do you think separates like a sub-elite runner from an elite? Do you see any traits in particular or something to do with their training that separates them apart?
It's going to sound corny, but it really is belief. But once you get there, it's not, people say the 1%ers and whatever else. And like, I've coached plenty of people that do, they take care of their bodies, they go and see the physio, and they see chiros, make sure they keep their body in a line, they eat well. Like, all those sort of things. But it really is when you get to that point that do you actually truly believe you can do it? And so without naming any names in the past, there's a few athletes that I've coached that just started to believe in what they could do, and in the male ledger. But then with the girls, like when I sat, and I'm happy to share this story to the broader community, when I sat down with Jenny and Millie on the 15th of January 2015, and I said to them, oh, they've just released the Olympic athletic schedule, and they said, what's that got to do with us? And I said, well, Millie, you're going to be, isn't that exciting? You're going to be running the marathon in the morning when Jenny's running the semi-final. And they both looked at me like, what? And like, I said, yeah, we're all going to go to Rio. It's going to be fantastic. And they're like, and Millie looks at me and goes, but Jimbo, I haven't even run a marathon. And I said, yeah, but that's all good. I said, that's where the goalposts are. And at that stage, I think Jenny's PB was 4:12. So over that next, 18 months, the two girls literally just bought in to believing. I mean, Jenny was a prodigious talent when she was a kid, but she really, truly believed that she was. And I said, you're not going to the Olympics to pick up tracksuits. You're not just going there to get a team tracksuit. You're going there to compete. So you're going to get out of your heat and you're going to be in the semi-final. And I believed that it was going to happen. And then they bought into it. And that's the only difference, honestly, between athletes that are here. You got to have talent, obviously, but the sub-elite have talent. And then you don't have to work harder, you work smarter. And then when you really buy into that process, it's incredible. So, and that's what I'm going to try and do with this man, because he's very good. And he doesn't believe in himself, but I think that next little, and there's a few of the people now I'm coaching at Sydney Uni who are in that same boat, and even like some of the opposite who I've worked with for 11 years, like he's now really starting to believe that he can be one of the best, not just in the country, but can compete at the global level. So yeah, I would say that, yeah. And in explaining that process.
Obsha is absolutely insane. Like, if there's one person you don't want to be with in the last 200 meters, it's Obsha, because his kick is mad. Like, I've seen plenty of insane kicks by him. But yeah, I like what you said there about belief, because I've been thinking about this a lot recently as well. But I don't do races at like national levels and whatever yet. But in the sub-elite / recreational road running scene that I kind of compete in, I don't think I've ever won a race without thinking in my head that I'm going to win, or at least having the belief. Because if you aren't there mentally before the race, then you've already ruined all your chances of winning a race. Whereas if you at least believe in yourself at the start of the race, you have a chance of winning that race. Even if you don't, you put yourself in the position to be able to win that race potentially. So I think the mental side of running is just as important as the physical side. So I definitely agree with you there. But yeah, it'll be cool to see Drew. I mean, I don't know Drew that well as an athlete yet, but if he doesn't believe in himself as much as he should, then it'll be cool to see how far he can get with that new adopted mindset. He definitely has the talent, he works hard, and it'll be cool to see him competing at that top end of the national level and see how he does. Because he's only 22, so I think he has plenty of, leeway in terms of age to peak in the events that he wants to peak in, which is the 5K and 10K. But I am curious, Drew, do you want to move on to like the half and the full marathon as well down the line?
Probably not.
Not yet.
Definitely not for a long time. I wouldn't want to move up to I wouldn't even want to do a half until I feel like I've really nailed say a 10. And then I guess with the full, I wouldn't really want to move up to a full once I feel like I've nailed a half. So I guess that's the same sort of thing with when you're doing a 5K to 10K. You probably don't want to do a 10K until you feel you can really, really do a good 5K. But while I feel, and I guess this on a smaller scale, this is a good example of, say, when you're younger, moving up distances too soon. So say like a kid in year 8, right? So let's say they're like 14, around that age group. Kids moving up to the 3K, maybe because it's an easier national qualifier and not doing any 800s or not doing any sort of cricket stuff and just going straight to 3Ks or straight to the long steeplechase or to a longer distance event, and sort of neglecting doing cricket stuff. And then when they find themselves in year 10, 11, 12, or even finish school, they don't really have any change of pace or any speed because they moved up too soon because maybe it was the easier pathway to nationals. And then they find themselves at the age of, let's say, 21, 22 in a 5K, and they're just blown out the back door in the last lap because they've got no speed, because they've never done it since they were like, they've just never done it because they didn't do any 800s or anything. So I guess that's a good example to use in my scenario. Why aren't I trying a half or a full? Or because I feel I've still got to develop my 8, 15, 5, and 10 first before I can move up, because you just got to be patient with, and that's something Jimbo's been teaching me. You just got to be patient with your moving up in distances, even though who knows, I might be better at a half than I am 5K, but might as well just take your time with it, move up when you're ready. But yeah, I'm happy with that example I gave. I reckon that's pretty good.
Well, that was good. I'll give a senior example. So, like with that, I mean, I always think that there's no substitute for speed. So, and Andrew knows that now, and he has a similar philosophy, and I know a few other coaches do that. All year round, you want to have a focus session where you do run pretty quick. And obviously, the faster you can run over a shorter distance, potentially the faster you'll run over a longer distance. So I've always sort of had that in my headspace right from the get-go. Millie, for example, when she came to me and we got rid of the steeplechase immediately, she'd run a couple of OK 5s, but I said to her, hey, why don't you do Zatopek? And so she did Zatopek in 2014, but she got third, ran 33.27 for a first ever 10K. Just missed the quality by 3 seconds for the comp gains for the B. And I thought, okay, no, that's definitely, we've made the right decision. We knew she'd made the right decision. So earlier in the season, like once we got into the new year, I said, why don't we set up for Gold Coast and you do the half marathon? It's flat, like it's the Oceania Championships. And all we'll have to do is probably increase training volume by about 10 to 15% over a period of 6 months. So she said, yeah, sweet. So she went up there and she ended up winning and ran 1:14.00 on debut. Got some cash. It was pretty exciting. And so straight away in my head, and what Drew was saying is, I went, okay, marathon. That's the marathon. And that's why I'd already put the seed out there, so that when she won the money at Blacktown Fun Run, where she ran her last 10K in her first marathon in 36 minutes, she just jogged 32Ks. She won the money, went to Amsterdam, and then in the end of 2015, she ran the 2:29.04 on debut. And it was literally that. So she had to do this to then do that to do that.
Yeah.
So we didn't, and it was always incrementally based upon her training. So once she displayed like she could do that, then it just made perfect sense that she actually moved out to distance. So some people would think that I took her out there quite quickly, but there was a real process to it. So, and then that's why by the time she went to World Champs in Cardiff and she did a massive PB, she did a 2 minute 55 second PB and 70.48 in the rain, came 13th. And then I knew if I took care of her for the rest of the year, that come Rio, she was going to be right up there in the top 20 in the world. And I didn't tell anyone. We just made sure that we did the right thing, and then she ended up doing it. So, but it was that was a 3.5 year process that went to that. And I think with Drewy, that's my mindset again, is that he's already open to do everything. And the fact that he's not frightened of cross country, and I love it when track runners are not frightened of cross country. So even this year, even though Obser didn't want to do the 10, he actually came down and did the 4K fun run. So he copped a bit of heat from the squad, but the fact is nearly all of my best track runners have all run cross country, including, as you know, with Jenny. She was a national junior cross country champion, and even a few years back, between the two Olympics, she won the state cross country down in Yarra. So, and she ran at national. She got 8th or something at national cross country. So she still wasn't afraid to leave the track and then do the hard work in the cross country season. So yeah.
Can you also talk about when your stint with On Track was? Because I know you were the coach for that. Were you the founder as well, or?
Oh no, Ben Norton and I, my mate,
Yeah.
shout out to Benny up in Queensland. He and I a few years ago, because my squad, I've had TRX, track road cross country. Then I had TFS, Train for Success 369. Then I had Run 369. And don't even get me into the 369 bit because that's another podcast. And then I said to Ben, because of COVID, not kind of like I'm not very good at social media. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I think Instagram is Instagram. Like, if you think of it right there and then, you do it, and if you don't, then the moment's gone. Hence, I've just had one of the most amazing weekends and forgot to take a single photograph. But yeah, so what was my point? What was I going there?
On Track.
So I said to Ben, so I can have an identity. What if we had a Sydney branch and a Queensland branch, and then with Rod down in Victoria, we've got a little bit of a triangular thing going now. So that what we wanted to do was that when nationals were in Sydney, that if he couldn't make it down here or Rod couldn't make it up to Sydney, that I would take responsibility for their athletes, and then vice versa. So if I couldn't go to Brisbane or I couldn't go down to Melbourne, that we basically created the On Track. And Rod just didn't change his name, but we signed a memorandum of understanding so that we did it all legally and stuff like that. But I haven't really driven the brand. So, and that I think you'd see now in the modern distance running, it's all branding, it's all social media. Yeah, it's all like, and and then I think with the ESP now, getting some young people around me who were very savvy in that area, that I think we can actually get some real traction in that space. So yeah, but I'll still keep the On Track just as a little side thing. Not a side thing that'll offend the people that are in that, but I'm going to keep that bubbling along, and we'll see what it produces.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't realize that you had that triangle system going on, which is pretty cool actually. And before we move on to the Eastern Suburbs Project, I want to quickly touch on one last thing. Because you've worked with so many athletes across different disciplines, at a really high level as well, I'm just wondering if you can name some other amazing athletes that you've been able to work with. Obviously, Jenny Blundell and Millie Clark you've already mentioned, but are there any other athletes that you've worked with?
Like who I've directly coached?
Yeah, or even just had a slight impact on them.
Oh, I mean,
a lot is the answer.
Yeah, well, to pick, like probably the most unique relationship I've had, very different to what I'm doing with Drew, for example, was my relationship with James Kahn. And had James Kahn not had his hip issues, and then he's ended up having a hip replacement, there was no doubt that he was going to go to Olympics. There was no doubt that he would have been on the plane with Jenny. And he was one of the most methodical people I've ever coached. And we became really good friends, but he actually taught me, having coached Bromley, and I don't know how many people listen to this, but coaching Nick was a unique experience as well, from a slightly different perspective, but still loved the experience of coaching Nicholas. But with James, he really showed me how professional a person could be, and he really was. So that relationship with him was really, really special. And unfortunately, I don't know if you've had a look through the history books, but he got second in 2010 when he was 19 in the 800 behind Renshaw. Then the next year, we got the goodies on Lachlan, legend of a man and runner, Sydney Uni, get that in. And then 12, we messed up the Olympic prep, and we decided to switch to the 1500 at Nationals, and because we've been doing a lot of aerobic work over the winter. And he ran I think he split 53-1 in the 400 and just got pipped by Risley. And then the next year he rolled the lot, so he beat Gregson and the rest of the crew, Josh Wright, Jeremy Roth, and a whole host of other people that were in that race that day in Sydney. And then he had he'd actually had a bursary in 2011 which I'm sorry, had a bit of fluid, and we had all that fixed up, and we thought it was done, and then he was starting to have issues, and then we x-rayed it, and unfortunately what had happened was the joint was eating itself. So he lost about 30% of the connective tissue in the joint, or the actual wall around the hip, or where the ball sits into the socket. And and then it just got worse and worse and worse, and unfortunately he had to retire from the sport very, very young. And so that for me is a pretty unique experience of someone that I've directly coached, and we progressed. So the 4 years in a row, he either came second or first at nationals across 2 different disciplines. And so for me, I think that's the best. He's not the best athlete in terms of the performance, in terms of the Olympics or something like that, but yeah. But even some of the junior kids that I've worked with in the past, and unfortunately just due to circumstance, they never got to keep going. But yeah, Carnage definitely. But then I've had so many different weird influences with other people that I've never coached, and really unique relationships. And because I'm a lover of athletics, it's not my number one sport, but Jury and I, we want to have our own podcast to talk about that. But to be associated with, and not from a coaching perspective, but going back to people like Collis Birmingham and like Ben Harradine. Ben and I are good mates. Haven't seen him for a long time because he's been based overseas. He's now a dad and all that sort of stuff. But he came to my wedding when he was 18, and there's a whole bunch of other people that I've had this prolonged friendship with over all of these years. So I'm sure I've had some impact on them. They've definitely had impact on me. And so far, it's had its moments, but for the most part, it's been fantastic.
Your whole life is a learning process, and you can always learn more from anyone in life. So that's a pretty cool thing to hear. But yeah, moving on to the Eastern Suburbs Project that you guys started. So from what I understand so far, it's to kind of create a pathway for Australian juniors that are finishing off high school and I guess have to contemplate whether they're going to the NCAA in the US or stay in Australia. And yeah, Drew's idea was kind of to create that pathway for the people that are staying in Australia and to, just keep developing them and see how far they can get. But if I'm wrong, correct me and go into more detail. But Drew, can you talk a bit about your vision with ESP?
Yeah, so I guess, so like we said before, I started talking to Jimbo about creating a Eastern Suburbs-based group probably, what would you say, like 6 months ago. And because just in the Eastern Suburbs right now, we both sort of felt there's options, but there's not options that suit everyone. And there's not a group in the Eastern Suburbs like that I feel that was working for me as well. So we discussed this idea of creating a new group based in the area, because I'm obviously from the Eastern Suburbs, but Jimbo's from like Parramatta, and he's a Westie. So and I needed to get over the bridge and communicate with the Westie. But the idea was to create a group in the Eastern Suburbs, and we would work together because sessions that Jimbo can't get to because he's obviously they're two different worlds, Parramatta and the Eastern Suburbs. So sessions that he couldn't get to, I'd sort of take the reins, and so far it's working pretty well. 8 weeks in, it's working pretty well. We're sort of doing it together, and I've been happy with how it's going. How would you summarise it?
Yeah, well, and I think that definitely
on the creating a pathway, sort of, that was another. With that, people leaving. I feel there's not really any options for people leaving school right now. The only option, pretty much, if you live in Sydney, if you really want to kick on with your running, the only option is pretty much go to college. There's not really any sub-elite or elite group in these suburbs right now that can sort of take you to that next level. So the idea was to, why that's not really good enough. Like, why is there not a single group in the area that we feel that can do that? So that was another sort of basis of the idea, to create that environment or space where you don't have to go to college. Like, for example, I didn't go to college. Some people don't want to go to America, or like some people would rather just stay home. So it was to create that as well. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's off that. Like, I think that's the thing now, that a lot of kids, they're being swooned by going to America. And so for me, coming into this role, I didn't primarily, I sort of said to the team here at the university and to the committee that I didn't take this role as a coaching role. I saw this more as an administrative thing, and being the conduit between Sydney University Sport and Fitness and Sydney University Athletics Club. And so primarily that's what I've done for the first year in the role. But then I've been meeting a lot of the athletes in the EAP and then having the winter last year and realising that there was a little bit of a gap. Dean Gleeson, my predecessor, he offers, he's still offering training in the Eastern Suburbs, but it's not, I wouldn't even say sub-elite, maybe one or two people, but it's more social, or it's become that way. And so, yeah, when we started talking about it, I thought, well, it's going to help Drew's athletes that don't decide to go to the States, and it's going to give people at Sydney Uni another option in regards to coaching. So the two have crossed over at the perfect time. So the people like Lachlan Townsend, who was being coached by Bradley Woods, but literally just training by himself, he's now come in and he's got bodies around him at training, and it's a completely different experience. So, and then people like Adam Schaefer, who's studying law and all that sort of stuff. Shafe's not sub-elite at this moment, but he doesn't know how good he can be, and he was literally just being self-coached, and already he's realised that with structure, with a bit more structure, and with bodies around him, like he's 23, 24, and he's loving his running more than he ever has in his life. And then to have, obviously, Drew's guys, like, just like York and Sebastian, who's also part of Sydney University, like there's this real synergy. York's still with RBH, he's at UTS. Yeah. So, but we've got this group now that's like realising that we've got an option. So, and that's the message that I guess the podcast gives us the potential to do that today. But also the message that I'm giving at Sydney University is that America is not the only choice. And that, I don't know if you're aware, but we've got 43 athletes currently on EAP scholarship. And there's a lot of money involved in that. So it's not a full ride, sort of free ride like you can get in America. But the reality is you've got an institution that's obviously been here for a very long time, and an athletics club that's existed since 1878. So that if I, as the director, can then also offer another option in regards to distance running, I would have been a fool if I didn't take advantage of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely awesome to hear. Yeah, I know York and Sebastian and Lachlan Townsend personally as well, and it'll be good to see how far they can go with the new group as well. Because I know as well, because I'm pretty good friends with Lockie Townsend, he has done a lot of training solo, and I've always wondered how he can keep the motivation up and just, keep training like that. But it's good to know that he's with a group now. Yeah,
and I've said to Bradley, because I've known Bradley for a long time. I watched Bradley when he was at the peak of his powers, 337, 1500 meter guy. And, Brad's, he's doing great things now up in the Hunter area, and when we spoke at the hour last week, I just said to him all week before now, I just said, look, I still want you to have an input and an impact on Lachlan's running. I don't want ESP just being something that's in a bubble, that's in isolation. I still want that communication and the appreciation and respect shown to previous coaches. So I think that's another important thing and I think what Drew's realised with me is that I'm very global in how I think and what I do. It's not, I have a bit of an ego, but not really. Like, kind of leave that at the door, because what I do is all about them. It's got nothing to do with me. And hence accolades, if you get awards here or there, which I've not got many of, it's just that satisfaction of watching people improve. And if I say too many names and people feel like they've been left out, so I've got to mention Lucy Alder. So Lucy was doing some training with Dino, and she was a little bit lost, and so real quick good story with Lucy is that when she ran her first 3K out of Bankstown at Trelaw last year, she was standing with me at the finish line, and I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "What do you mean? What am I doing?" I'm about to run the 3K. And I said, "Yeah, well, the start's over there. It's at the 200 metres." And she goes, "Oh, bugger." So she sprints across. I said, no, just walk, you goose. Don't use up like all your ATP. Just walk over there, you silly thing. So, and then the next 3K she did, she improved by over 20 seconds, got 25-second improvement. And then it just seemed silly that she didn't start doing some work with me. So I started coaching her probably in about January, February, and just started coaching her by correspondence. So that when we got the ESP thing up, boom, so she's come into that. Unfortunately, fortunate for her, but unfortunate for us, she's going away to study in England for the rest of the year. But in saying that, what it does is it gives us that feminine perspective as well. So Drew hasn't coached a lot of girls, and then my Aspen Lambert, she's sort of coming across as well. So which has been great. So Aspen can jump in, and then there's a couple of other Sydney Uni girls who have come to one or two sessions, and there's a few others that are contemplating, purely because with study, as you'd appreciate, a lot of the Sydney Uni students here are highly intelligent, and their workloads in terms of study are incredible, particularly when they're in semesters. So yeah, just having that option and having that, and I think too for Drew, like it's been quite enjoyable to have that a bit of female balance. There's no parity at this moment, but you know, that's something that we can definitely, as whatever we are, creators, we can work towards a little bit more parity within the squad.
I'm glad we got to hear a ton of wisdom today from, you know, all parts of life. I guess one last thing I wanted to touch on before we finish, or there's a couple more, I guess, is I want to get your thoughts on double threshold training, just because you have a lot of knowledge in the training field. And yeah, is it for everyone? Is it for some people? What are your general thoughts on it?
It's the fad at the moment.
Yeah, I know it's, well, I only really been made aware of it through Drew, through this interview. I'm not really, I'm always focused on creating my own stuff. And I think from a creative perspective, like, I mean, it just looks like a little bit of volume, just a bit, I don't know. And obviously, like, to speak on it specifically, I don't probably know enough about it, anecdotally or otherwise. I don't really know anyone that's doing it in Australia unless Drew does. Like, I don't know anyone that switched to it. I'm sure it's got its reasons and their scientific basis. I mean, my concern is if you're doing, you know, 10K plus a 10K, you know, tempo a bit faster, and then you're doing, you know, 25 400s in the afternoon. I'm like, far out. Where's the recovery? And it's okay if you're a professional athlete, I guess, because he's probably the person that we know who's doing it, who's famous for it. He's probably got all the doctors around him, so that he's and the right staff around him, so that he might be training quite early in the morning. And then he's got that recovery process. He might be in a tank, he might be, you know, flotation or whatever else, and then he's seeing the physio or whatever he does on a daily basis, so that his body can then do what he's doing in the afternoon. I want to know exactly what is he doing the next day, and then I want to know from a recovery standpoint, where's the adaptation occur. So he's obviously stressing the body, but where's he recovering the body so the body can adapt? And so I don't know enough about it, but I'm definitely going to be looking into it, because I think there's some days, like particularly someone like Drew can definitely handle that. Maybe not that exact volume, like that day there where he's doing 30Ks or 40Ks, whatever he's doing. Like, that's a lot of running for a middle distance goal for, you know, 15.5. But I definitely think like someone like a Drew could probably handle a 6 and 6, and maybe 10 400s in the other, not 25. You know what I mean? So, but it's each one to themselves, and I think the good thing about it is it gets people talking and thinking, and, you know, the model of, you know, training distance running hasn't changed very much since the 60s. You know, and people like Lydia, who, you know, along with Bowman and those guys, when they started playing around with, you know, the 100 mile or whatever, and coming up with a formula or some magic way of doing it, which seems still up until recently has been copied. But I still feel like a lot of people are still trying to do that 100 mile thing. Obviously, if you're marathon, you're probably doing a little bit more. So yeah, it's about training smarter, not harder. So if it does work for the particular athlete, then I guess, yeah. But I like all fads and trends. I think with this young kid that we've got at the moment, it's unbelievably talented young boy. I know that he's not. I don't think he's doing it, but
Cam Myers.
Is he? I don't think he is. I'm not aware that Dick Telford's. I don't think Dick's prescribing that. In my opinion, there's a few other people, but Dick's probably the best distance coach in Australian history. So that's just my opinion. But and I don't believe he's prescribing to it. So yeah.
Drew, your thoughts?
Just I guess add on to what Jimbo said. Yeah, I guess if you feel it works for yourself, then maybe it's something to give it a try. But I mean, with training, it's there's no one size fits all. It's fully individual. So double session days might work for one person in a group, and then the other person in the group might just pull up sore every day, after every session. So like, yeah, it's just, for some people might be a good idea, but for others it might not work. So it's not like with what Jimbo said with the 100-mile week thing as well. Like, that was a bit of a fad at the time as well, and everyone was trying it. But how can that distance work for every single run? Like, it's just, you have to find what works for you. So if you feel like the double session days works for you, then maybe, yeah, give it a go. But if you don't, if you try it for a couple for a couple weeks and you're not really feeling, you're feeling just worn out and you're not really feeling recovered enough, then maybe it's not for you, and maybe go back to a more traditional approach of, if you want to run twice in a day, maybe do a recovery run as the other activity for the day, which is what I do when I do sessions on a Tuesday and Saturday. I'll just do an easy run for the other activity for the day. But yeah, I mean, but that's not just with double threshold training. That's with all training. Like, it's what works for one person isn't going to work for the other person. So,
for example, on Saturday I prescribed 8 different training sessions.
Yeah, so that
Yeah,
you need,
wow.
that's that. Yeah, so you need to find, and that comes back to creating that coach-athlete relationship. You, as a coach, you need to know what works for your athlete. If you don't know that, then how on earth are you going to be able to prescribe them something that suits them?
Yeah.
So I guess I was going to say it's up to the coach to understand that, but it's also up to the athlete to provide feedback to the coach of how they're feeling, how they're pulling up after sessions.
Yeah.
So if you're someone, say, like yourself, who I know who doesn't really have a direct coach, then maybe reaching out to the networks that you know, reaching out to people that you know, and trusting that how your body feeling determines what you should be doing. Like, listening to your body, not just saying, okay, I'm doing this because that's what old mate does in America or in Europe, or no, I'm doing this because that's how my body feels, and that's what works for me. So I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, just listen to how you feel, not just because it's on a Word document.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think running training in a nutshell is just like, yeah, you want to kind of try and get your long run in, get a bit of tempo and get a bit of speed in, and do easy runs in between. But most importantly, to just listen to your body. And if you make slight incremental changes, really pay attention to how your body is feeling the day after and stuff like that to, yeah, stay on track. Because I think even though I'm pretty experimental with different types of training, because I don't have a coach, I am always aware of how my body's feeling. So I think I learn every time I try this new training method. And I feel like I see myself as a little experiment subject, which is pretty cool. Just because I don't have a coach.
You use your platform that you have on social media and on YouTube, and I'm sure that a lot of your viewers, because you use a fair few different like training philosophies, don't you? So I guess your viewers would probably see how you're going with it and see how you're reacting to it. So you're right. You're probably a good, if someone wants to try and have a look at how different like programs work, seeing how you're doing with them, is that you're right. You're a good experiment. How they go.
Yeah. And going back to a little bit of what Jimbo was talking about, how it's good to have good connections with everyone because you can learn from everyone. And I've actually messaged Drew quite a few times regarding my training and where I should take it. And I've also messaged people like Ed Goddard and a few other people to get feedback on what they think of what I'm doing and stuff, which is always quite useful. So I think, yeah, that's why I try and maintain my network across the Australian runners, at least, to try and learn from every single one. Because I've learned quite a bit from Drew, actually. And now I've learned a lot from Jimbo too, which is pretty cool. So, yeah, I might even message him and ask him more stuff after this podcast too. But
yeah, well, I think too, because that's one of the most important things is that, like, one of my mottos of life is, to try. You're never gonna make everyone happy, right? But you try and get on with most people most of the time. You do, and the thing is, even though if anyone that watches this and that knows me, the people that don't, that's great. You can judge me by my beard and my hat on backwards and like everyone else has. But the reality is, I've learned so much from so many people that I don't ever want that to stop. So, and as I say, I'm just a primary school teacher who just happens to know a lot of people with PhDs. So, and my other motto of life is that by the time I'm no longer here and shuffle off this mortal coil, or whatever they say, that I really want to know a little bit about everything. So, and then the things that really interest me, that I learn a lot more about. And I think all of us as athletes, as coaches, whatever role you're playing in other people's lives, that I think if we're always, endeavouring to learn a little bit every day, then it's only going to make, people better athletes and also better human beings.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, there's no point creating unnecessary enemies, basically, because you can always get a bit of good from everyone. So, yeah, I think that's kind of a good topic to end on. But one last little thing, talk about your other hobbies outside of running, because I know you have a whole personality outside of running as well, from what I hear from Drew.
Myself,
Like,
yeah,
cooking and everything, right?
yeah. Quick story. Millie and I got invited to be on MKR a couple of years ago. We couldn't do it because she, fortunately, she had to run world champs in London. And when we did the online thing, that the two of the questions, apparently the reason why we were the third people asked to do it, the producer Rebecca rang me and I said, "Oh, why did you pick me?" And she said, "Oh, well, your answers were very different to everybody else." She said, "The idea of being on live television scares the shit out of you, and it scares the shit out of me. And the other thing is, I don't need to win $250,000." So I said, "I don't need the money, and being on television just scares the bugger out of me." So she thought that would be really funny, and to have an Olympic athlete and their coach was pretty unique. But yes, I at one point nearly I was like Instagramming food every second thing that I did.
You're a bit of a foodie.
Love my food. Learned how to cook when I was 19. Watched my mum a little bit, and then moved away from home. And then got Margaret Ford's cookbook and started cooking things like beef bourguignon when I first started cooking. And then I've explored all the foods of the world. And I actually like cooking more than I like eating, even though I'm a big guy. That's more to do with Pinot Noir and other things that are in liquid form. But so my passion for cooking, I have a lot of knives. I pretty much have almost every piece of cooking equipment you can imagine.
You just started working with my cousin.
Yeah, I love cutting things up. Like I liken cooking to coaching, like, because there's all the ingredients that go into making a really good athlete. And when I cook a dish, like I like to, and some people that know me pretty closely know that I used to be completely obsessed with food. Like, it was just ridiculous. I'm like, at one point I had 6 or 7 different oils. I had a bit of an edible garden going, had about 16 plants going when I started doing bonsai. So I went to bonsai school for 12 months, and then so I've still got about 40 or 50 plants, which I'm still taking care of. And then very passionate. Like, I've had dogs, but when my current dog Nitro, who's a whippet, he's probably the best trained dog in Sydney, because I went and studied all the seasonal art stuff. So that when I do something, despite what I look like and how people think of me, when I became obsessed with sake for a little bit. So I went and researched and found out as much as I could in regards to the influence that it had on the Japanese economy and the whole process of polishing rice and the purity of water and all the bits and pieces. So that when I started doing something, I get teased for it a bit. My family think that I'm a lunatic, so sometimes I am. But yeah, so when all my hobbies, and I taught myself how to play the guitar when I was 32. I learned 75 chords in 3 months. Started writing songs. They were terrible, so I obviously never recorded or released. So I love a bit of singing as well, and I just think there's so many things that we can explore within ourselves, and I've tried never to be one-dimensional in what I do. And even as a coach, the fact that I can coach pretty much all event groups and still enjoy watching all the events in athletics, I think if you can stay as diverse and as open to as many things as you can, it just makes this whole journey a bit more fun. So
yeah, absolutely agree again with everything. That's so awesome to hear. And yeah,
Thanks.
like I heard from, sorry?
Trying to come up with, I haven't done a new thing. I started learning the bass 2 years ago, and I wasn't very good at that. So, and I'm hopeless at language. So if there's any teachers out there that who are good at teaching language, I'm shocking. I've got no idea. So
what is the language you'd want to learn?
I'd love to. I can obviously speak a little bit of French, but I think I'd love to. Like, Italian's just very romantic and kind of sexy, and I reckon Japanese would be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's good to hear. I would teach you Japanese, but actually I'm not that good either, just because I've always been speaking English, so that'll be tough for me.
An amazing country. Like, I'm kind of mildly obsessed. I've got a mild obsession with Japan. But bonsai actually did start in China. So just
okay.
for the, want to know the history of
right.
It did actually start in China. So yeah,
I didn't know that. I thought it was Japanese.
Miyagi's held responsible for that, but no, it actually did like a lot of things started actually in China.
Yeah.
So there you go.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for all the wisdom you've shared, both of you, in this podcast episode. I think it was awesome that we got Jimbo on last minute, because originally this was meant to be Drew and I, but it ended up being 3 people that love having a yarn, and we've now had the longest podcast episode ever on my podcast series. So, yeah, I think this will be a good episode.
What about Drew? Do you know about Drew's obsession with corduroy hats?
I don't.
That's one of his little, not a hobby per se, but he's a bit of a collector.
No, I warned you that the podcast would be pretty long. But a lot of the time, Jimbo and I are talking. It's rarely about our, like my training. It's more just about complete nonsense. We talk about rugby league a lot, but
Yeah.
Like we think that the two of us could actually do a better job than Brad Fittler. So
and New South Wales Blues.
yeah. We would dearly love the opportunity. New South Wales Rugby League.
No, yeah, we spend we talk about a fair bit of nonsense.
Yeah.
Well, let me know if you ever make your podcast with you two, because I mean, I can try and help plug it if I can.
I'm waiting for my son to finish his HSC because Jackson's very he's taken a lot of photos for Athletics New South Wales, and he's just come off playing Trunchbull in his high school's version of Matilda, and he was a featured artist at School Spectacular last year, and it looks like he's going to get a solo performance at this year's School Spec. So he's very busy doing his school and doing all this extracurricular stuff. And massive sports nut, like seriously massive. Knows every player in the rugby league, knows every player in the NBA, and eventually one day wants to become. He'd love to announce like in rugby league. He'd love to be a sportscaster. So you have like, and so when he's a bit more freed up, we're gonna sit around and just talk rubbish. So
for the 5 people that might listen.
I know Jackson's got over 1,000 like people following his vlog, and like he's been vlogging since he was 10, so he's now 18, so he's into that. So you'll have to meet him next time we're at athletics. If he's there, I'll introduce you to him. He's a good kid.
Right.
You're alumni.
I am, yeah.
Oh, dude, I'm just going to be plugging the rubbish out of this. I'll actually have to go on. I'll have to get Jackson to show me how to go on all the social medias and put it on the social. I'll put it on the platforms. Get on it. Get around it.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you both for coming on and your time. I'll let you know when the podcast is up. But yeah, we'll give Eastern Suburbs Project a little plug as well.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Thank you.